So, looking at number 15 from the homework, the equation was 3x squared plus 3 equals 9x. Now, we can't use a quadratic formula if we are not in quadratic form, which means we must be in ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So I have to subtract the 9x from each side, which goes in the middle, so I get 3x squared minus 9x plus 3 equals 0. Since it says use the quadratic formula, we'll go ahead. In reality, if I were to see this in an actual problem, I'd probably factor the 3 out first. And then I could factor it probably pretty easily. But as it is, we'll leave it the way that it is. We'll go ahead and use our quadratic formula. So negative b should be positive 9 plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So again, writing that quadratic formula down in case you don't remember it. Oh, no, it's not b squared. No, you're right. It's not. Sorry. I'm getting all confused. There's our formula. We go ahead and simplify that out. That's 9 plus or minus the square root of 81 minus, what is that, 36? Over 6. So that's 9 plus or minus the square root of 5145 over 6. And that would probably be good enough for my answer, but we can simplify that. So like for bonus points in the test, if you had something like that, I would have you simplify the square root of 45, square root of 45, the square root of 9 times square root of 5, or 3 root 5. So that'd be 9 plus or minus 3 root 5 over 6. I can factor a 3 out of the numerator. Give me 3 plus or minus root 5 over 6. And now I can cancel factors. I can't cancel parts, but I can cancel factors. So 3 plus or minus root 5 over 2. Yes.
Okay, so if we were to factor out like the 45, would we have to keep going or could we stop?
If you just went this far, that'd be fine. I'm just showing, in Algebra 2, you will definitely be expected to come this far. But for now, I'm more concerned with can you get this far. Now, a lot of them, like I say, wound up being perfect squares. And people didn't continue when they got that. But say something like, I don't know, number 4, 6p squared minus p minus 117 equals 0. So again, negative b, which would be 1, plus or minus the square root of negative 1 squared minus 4 times 6 times negative 117 over 2 times 6. So that's 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 plus 4 times 6 times 117. I don't know off the top of my head. 4 times 6 times 117 is 2808. Why is it plus? Because minus a negative turns to plus a positive over 12. So 1 plus or minus the square root of 2809 divided by 12. Well, the first thing we should do is check to see if that's a perfect square. So square root of 2809. I don't expect you to know that, but certainly you can check it in your calculator and you get a 53. Oh. And that I would expect everyone to be able to do. And then to finish it off, Because now we just have numbers we have to do. So this gives us two choices, 1 plus 53 over 12 and 1 minus 53 over 12. So that's 54 over 12 and negative 52 over 12, which we then reduce. 54 over 12 is 27 over 6, or 9 over 2. 52 over 12, and again, your calculator will do this for you. You get 52 fraction key 12 equals, and you get 13/3. So these are my actual answers. What that means is that would have factored. If we get a perfect square here, it means we possibly could have factored this, but the instructions said specifically use quadratic formula, so that is the method you need to use, even though we could have factored that. So when you get to this point, always check to see if this is a perfect square. Because if it is, you should continue. If it's not, you could quit there if you like for now. You're not going to worry as much about simplifying. But if it is a perfect square, I do expect you to be continuing. Because it gets rid of all the square roots. It gives us a much easier problem. Okay? Other questions? Again, quadratic formula is just one of those things that you have to be practicing to be good. Once you practice with it, it's pretty easy. It's really just a matter of crunching numbers. I mean, you're just putting numbers into a formula and cranking them out. But it's one you'll be using a lot in Algebra 2. Let's look at our review then. There are basically just a few sections in our review: multiplying and solving. Equation, solving by factoring, solving by quadratic formula. I've broken down the review here into a couple different, just a little bit differently, but when you get the review sheet, you'll notice it's very similar to the quiz, I'm sure, as is what we've become accustomed to. Multiplying. This goes all the way back to last week, but this is the very basic stuff. When I multiply polynomials like this, what do? It's distributive property or FOIL, right? So what 3x times x minus 5 is going to give me minus 15x, yes. Make sure you distribute to everything. I get far too many people do 3x squared minus 5x. When I have binomials, remember we have to FOIL. I can't just take the x times x and negative 3 times the 5. Those are only 2 of my 4 parts for FOIL. The x times x gives me x squared. Outside gives me plus 5x. Inside gives me minus 3x. Last gives me the minus 15. Then I combine the outside inside if I can. That's x squared plus 2x minus 15. It's no different when I have numbers in front. It's just we get bigger numbers. First, 2x times 3x gives me 6x squared. Outside, 2x times negative 2 is negative 4x. Inside, negative 7 times 3x is negative 21x. Again, I have to be very careful with my signs. Watching my positives and negatives very carefully. And finally, last, negative 7 times negative 2 is a plus 14. And then we can combine terms, 6x squared minus 25x plus 14. So the multiplying part, I'm hoping you're going to find fairly simple, because I think you did when we were doing it in the homework. Confuse it with the factoring, multiply. Read the instructions. Factoring. Factor completely. This isn't solving yet. Most of the stuff in the homework tonight is actually solving. We'll get to that next slide. But let's just work on the factoring part first. When I factor, it's like doing FOIL backwards or distributive property backwards, something like that. So we're trying to find out where we started. When the leading coefficient is 1, it's a little easier. When the leading coefficient is not 1, here, where it's 7, it's a little tougher. Either way, we do a product and sum. Look for magic numbers. It's just that when the leading coefficient is 1, when there's no number in front of the x squared, other than 1, which we don't write, our magic numbers also help us find our solution very quickly. Whereas when it's not a 1 in front, our magic numbers only have to split up, and we have to do more factoring. So here, what two numbers what's my product going to have to be? X squared minus 8x plus 15. What's the product going to have to be? The two numbers are going to have to multiply to give me 15 and add to give me negative 8. What two numbers multiply to give me 15 and add to give me negative 8? Negative 5 and negative 3. So my magic numbers are negative 5 and negative 3. So this is just going to factor into x minus 5, x minus 3. So our magic numbers basically give us our factors when that leading coefficient is 1, and only then. So this one down here would be similar. My product has to be negative 140, and my sum has to be 4. What two numbers multiply to give me negative 140 and add to give me 4? That's a little tougher. So maybe I start trying. 140 would be 140 times negative 1. That would give me a 139. No. How about 70 times negative 2 would give me a 68? Does 3 go into 140? No. 14 and 10. 14 and negative 10. That would give me a 4. Yep. There it is. It's not always obvious, though, and if it's not obvious to you, don't feel bad about making a little chart. So 14 and negative 10, and since this is a leading coefficient 1, this is a short one. X plus 14, x minus 10. We're done. This is also a short one because there's only 2 terms. When there's only 2 terms, you're either going to be difference of perfect squares or greatest common factor, and that's going to be it. Here, what's it going to be? Is there a common factor? What would that common factor be? 8x. Leaving me x minus 4. Everything's linear now. There's no exponents left. We're done. This is the one that's trickier. 7x squared minus 59x plus 24. Now we have a trickier problem because we have the leading coefficient 7 there. What's my product going to have to be? How are we going to find my product? Two numbers have to multiply to equal what? The same as okay, but where do you get 168? Okay, A and C, because we call this the AC method. We multiply A times C to give me my product. My sum has to be negative 59. Okay, so now I start looking for that. Two numbers multiply to give me 168 and add to give me negative 59. That's not going to be easy, so we start checking. 160, that's negative 1 times negative 168. That gives me 169. Negative 2 times negative 84 gives me negative 86. Positive. No, they both have to be negative because the sum is negative and the product is positive. What about 168 divided by 3? 56. Ding. We got it. Not obvious. but we find it. Then our procedure is we rewrite this polynomial, 7x squared, and we use our magic numbers in the middle, minus 3x minus 56x plus 24. We then have to group. First two, leave the sign outside the parentheses. Second two, since that changed this, we have to change that to a minus 24. And then we start greatest common factors. What's the greatest common factor between 7x squared and negative 3x? X, leaving me 7x minus 3, minus the greatest common factor here, 8. Yeah, and there's a hint here because I need this 56x to turn into a 7x. 56 divided by 7 is what? 8. Leaving me 7x minus 3. Aha, so that's 7x minus 3 times x minus 8. And we're all done. So it's a couple extra steps. I mean, clearly the leading coefficient of being 1 is much easier because the magic numbers are my solution. But when I have a number in front other than the 1, I have to use this grouping method if I'm going to factor. When it says solve, it's really no different, except now we're going to take that last step and set our factors equal to 0, and we're done. So we're still going to factor, but then we're going to go from there. How about x squared minus 10 equals 0? Now, this one doesn't require factoring, does it? What do we do? Because there's only two terms, and one of them is a constant, I can just do this. If there was like a plus 3x or something in there, a middle term, I wouldn't be able to do it. But because just an x squared and a constant, I can do this. So x equals plus or minus the square root of 10. Don't forget the plus minus when we take the square root of both sides. Now, I can't take the square root of both sides all the time. I can't take something like this, move the 12x and the 35 to the other side and take the square root. That's not going to work. I can only do that when I just have a single whole number to the other side. So it's pretty rare, but you can do it that way. We call that extraction. This one, I could try to do 3x squared equals 6x, but it doesn't work so well because I get an x on both sides. So what could I do? What I always do. What do we always do with a polynomial? We try to factor. Well, how do I factor 3x squared minus 6x? Greatest common factor, which would be 3x, leaves me with x minus 2 equals 0. And now that we've got it factored, now I just take each individual factor and solve it for 0. What value of x makes 3x into 0? No, negative 3 would give me negative 9. Just 0, right? 3 times 0 is 0. What value of x makes this one into 2? A 2. So my solutions are x equals 0 or 2. This one looks rough, but again, all we do is factor. Product has to be 35. Sum has to be 12. Obviously, that's going to be which two numbers? 7 and 5. Yes. And so my magic numbers are 7 and 5, and since it's a 1 up here, I can just go x minus 7, I'm sorry, x plus 7, x plus 5. If that's the case, what number would I put in here to make this one a 0? And this one would be, now remember, these are solutions, negative 7 and negative 5 are solutions. The factors are x plus 7 and x plus 5. The factors and the solutions are related to each other, but they are not the same thing. Solutions are individual values that if I substitute them in the equation, makes it true, or makes it equal to 0. The factors are what you would multiply to get the equation. 5x squared minus 18x minus 8 equals 0. A little more complicated because they have a number up front of x squared. We can still do that. What's the product have to be? Negative 40. Yeah, 5 times negative 8 is negative 40. The sum has to be negative 18. Two numbers multiply to give me negative 40 and add to give me negative 18. Well, it's not 40 and 1. How about 20 and 2? If the 20 is negative, aha, there are my magic numbers, negative 20 and 2. So I'm going to rewrite this, 5x squared minus 20x plus 2x, because that gives me negative 18x, minus 8 equals 0. Equals 0 just kind of along for the ride right now. We group it. Common factor? 5x, leaving me x minus 4, plus, because it's plus there, x minus 4. So 5x plus 2 times x minus 4 equals 0. So what value of x turns x minus 4 into 0? 4. What value am I going to get from 5x plus 2? Opposite of 2, so negative 2 over 5. So there are my solutions. These are all just factoring techniques we're going to know. Now, obviously the whole quiz is not going to be these types, but they will be on there. Plenty will be like this or the easier stuff. But be prepared for just about anything. Finally, solve using the quadratic formula. If it says using the quadratic formula, you must use the quadratic formula. Even if you solve it through factoring or some other method, you will not get the points because this is really testing the formula. So again, negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus everything over 2a. Well, here b is negative 2, so negative 2 is positive 2 plus or minus negative 2 squared minus 4 times 5 times negative 6 over 2 times 5. So that's 2 plus or minus the square root of 4. That's 20 plus 6, that's plus 120 over 10. So that's 2 plus or minus the square root of 124 over 10. And I would probably let that be right there. Could we simplify that? Pretty sure 124 is evenly divided by 4. 31 times 4. And then I could factor the 2 out of the numerator. So it's 1 plus or minus root 31 over 5 would be the simplest terms. But honestly, I'd probably take this answer right here. That's just going to be on your quiz. Over these different ways of solving polynomial equations. So make sure you know your formulas, make sure you know the factor. That's what we're about, because starting on Thursday then we'll dive into chapter 10 with circles. And with circles, sometimes we're going to get quadratic equations that we have to solve. Actually not that many, but we will get some. And sometimes you need a factor, sometimes you need to use quadratic formula. Excellent review of algebra. Any questions? Oops, let me do this. No, hand